My name is Danielle Hartwell. I'm 29, and until last week I thought moving out would be the quietest part of my life. I packed my things the way you pack when you don't want to fight, boxes taped too tight, shoes wrapped in old hoodies, my laptop bag hugged to my chest like it could keep me invisible. I waited until the house was empty, rolled my last box down the driveway, and for a moment I felt something dangerously close to relief. Then my phone buzzed. Not a text, not a call, a notification. Someone had tagged me. I opened it expecting a petty joke. Maybe a passive-aggressive meme, because that's what my family does when they want to hurt you without admitting it. Instead, I saw a photo of the driveway I had just walked away from, my old bedroom window in the background, and a caption that made my stomach go cold. Finally, the freeloader is gone. At first I laughed, because it was so cruel it felt unreal. Then I saw the number under it. 1,234 likes. People didn't just see it, they celebrated it. And the comments kept coming, stacking up like bricks. Mom wrote, "No more cooking or laundry for a failure." Dad didn't type a single word, which almost would have been kinder, but he liked a comment that said, "Unemployed people should learn to live on their own." That was the part that made my hand stop shaking. Not the insult. The certainty behind it. The way they all agreed on who I was without knowing anything. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. I didn't even cry. I scrolled. I read every name, and I did something that would have looked pathetic to anyone watching. I liked the comments back. Every single one. Because I needed them comfortable. I needed them proud. I needed them to believe they'd finally won. Then I put my phone down, sat on the floor of my new apartment with the boxes still unopened, and made one decision that changed everything. A week later, my screen lit up like a fire alarm. 24 missed calls, 33 messages, voicemails, voice notes, frantic apologies that didn't sound like apologies at all. They wanted to talk. They needed something. And that's when I knew I'd timed it perfectly. Too late. If you think this story is just about a cruel Facebook post, wait until you hear why that house was never really theirs, and why their confidence collapsed the moment I stopped staying silent. When people read that post, they assume I was kicked out. They assume I was mooching off my parents, sleeping until noon, eating their groceries, drifting through life with zero shame. That's the story my family has been selling for years because it's convenient. It makes them look hardworking and patient. It makes me the punchline. But here's the truth that never fit their narrative. That house in the suburbs outside Columbus was never really theirs. It wasn't some magical reward they earned. It was a gift they got to borrow. And they spent years pretending the owner didn't exist even while I was sitting right there at the kitchen table. My grandmother on my mom's side, Lorraine, was the only person in that family who looked me in the eye and saw me. She was blunt, old school, and allergic to excuses. When I was a kid, she would show up with a grocery bag, take one look at our pantry, and start asking questions that made my mom's smile tighten. Lorraine didn't hate my mom. She hated what my mom did with money, the shopping sprees that turned into boxes on the porch every week. The weekend getaways charged to credit cards like consequences were optional. The way she'd borrow from Lorraine with a sweet voice and a promise, and then act offended when Lorraine asked for it back. I didn't understand any of that when I was 8 and my parents moved us into Lorraine's house. I just knew the neighborhood had sidewalks, the backyard had a swing set, and for the first time I had my own room. My sister treated it like a kingdom she'd inherited. My parents treated it like proof they'd made it. Lorraine treated it like a test. When she died, I was 22. I sat in a stiff funeral dress and watched my mother cry like her heart was breaking, but I'd seen her cry before. I'd seen her cry when bills were due and she wanted someone else to fix it. The week after the funeral, the lawyer called a meeting. I went because I thought it was just paperwork. My mom went because she assumed she was collecting something. My sister came along because she never misses a chance to feel important. The lawyer slid a folder across the desk and said Lorraine had made her decision years ago, and she'd been very specific. The house was left to me. Not my mom. Not my dad. Not split between siblings. Me. My mother's face changed so fast I still remember it like a jump cut in a movie. Confusion, then anger, then a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The lawyer explained the condition. My parents and my sister could live there as long as they wanted. No deadline, no eviction hanging over them for simply existing. But ownership belonged to me, legally and fully, and Lorraine had documented it because she didn't trust my mother not to refinance it into oblivion the second it was in her hands. I should have spoken up right then. I should have protected myself. But I was 22, grieving, and raised to believe being good meant being quiet. So I nodded, signed where they told me, and went home to a house everyone still called theirs. Within a month, my mom was hosting backyard barbecues like nothing had happened, giving neighbors tours of the kitchen like she'd paid for it with her own sweat. My dad started talking about remodeling the bathroom. My sister bragged about our place on social media as if it was her personal achievement. And then came the part that makes my stomach twist when I say it out loud. I started paying rent. $250 a month, every month for 7 years. Not because anyone forced me with a contract. Because my mother would sigh and say the bills were tight, and then she'd look at me like I owed her for being born. So I paid. I paid while the DoorDash bags kept showing up on weekends. I paid while the Netflix and streaming subscriptions stayed active. I paid while my mom bought new decor for the living room and posted it online with captions about her hard work. And every time I tried to remind myself I was the owner, the word felt ridiculous in my mouth, like something I wasn't allowed to claim. Because in that house, ownership didn't matter. Only power did. From the outside, it was easy to label me a failure. I was always home. Always on my laptop, rarely dressed like I was going anywhere important. To my family, that was all the evidence they needed. In their minds, real work meant a uniform, a boss, a schedule they could brag about to neighbors. Anything else was just killing time. What they never bothered to learn was that my bedroom had quietly become my office, not a hobby room, not a hiding place. An actual workspace where I built something piece by piece while they were busy laughing at me. For 5 years, I worked as a freelance conversion copywriter and e-commerce funnel strategist. I wrote product pages, email campaigns, landing pages, and ad copy for small brands and local businesses that couldn't afford big agencies but still wanted results. I helped a candle shop double their online sales. I rewrote the checkout flow for a fitness studio that was bleeding customers. I didn't do it for exposure or favors. I did it for contracts, invoices, and deposits that went straight into an account no one else had access to. I kept it quiet on purpose, not because I was ashamed, but because every time I tried to explain what I did, my mom would wave her hand and say, "Sitting at a computer all day isn't a real job." My sister went further. She told her friends I was probably doing something sketchy online, the kind of comment disguised as a joke but designed to stick. After that, I stopped correcting anyone. I bought a mini fridge for my room so no one could accuse me of eating their food. I did my laundry late at night to avoid the comments about me being useless. I skipped Sunday barbecues and family dinners, the ones where everyone talked over me anyway, and ordered my own food instead. That isolation wasn't an accident, it was survival. The worst part wasn't the money or the chores. It was the way they talked about me as if I wasn't in the room, like I was a long-term problem they were patiently tolerating. When my boyfriend at the time found out I was still living at home at 28, he tried to be polite about it, but the disappointment showed anyway. He said he couldn't see a future with someone who hadn't launched yet. I explained the situation with the house. Tried to tell him it wasn't what it looked like, but he didn't want the full story. He wanted a simple explanation he could repeat to his friends. So he left, and my family treated that like proof they'd been right all along. What none of them saw was that while they were busy judging me, I was planning. Quietly, carefully. I wasn't stuck. I was positioning myself. My plan wasn't dramatic. It wasn't revenge yet. It was escape with receipts. I gave myself 18 months because I didn't want to leave in a panic and crawl back. I wanted one clean move. No debts, no favors, no reason for anyone to say I couldn't make it. I tracked every dollar that came in. I paid my taxes. I kept contracts organized in folders. I built a cash buffer big enough to survive slow months because freelance work can be unpredictable, and the last thing I needed was my family smugly watching me fail. While my mom assumed I was wasting time online, I was negotiating retainers and improving my rates. While my sister rolled her eyes at my laptop, I was building a client list that didn't care what my family thought. The apartment I bought wasn't fancy. It was small, clean, and mine. A one-bedroom near Columbus that felt like breathing after holding your breath for years. I didn't tell anyone when I started looking. I didn't ask for opinions. I didn't even mention the word mortgage. I bought it with savings and a simple closing process, and when the keys hit my palm, I sat in the empty living room and listened to the silence like it was music. Then I moved the way people move when they don't want their family sabotaging them. A little at a time, one carload after another. Books in a tote. Winter coats in trash bags. Important papers tucked into my backpack. I moved my most valuable things first, not because I was paranoid, but because I'd learned what resentment can do when it's bored and looking for a target. The day I finally rented a small truck for the last load, I waited until everyone was out. I loaded the furniture I'd paid for, the desk I'd worked at, the chair my sister used to sit in just to make fun of me while I was on calls. When I was almost done, my mom pulled into the driveway early. She got out, saw the truck, and her face tightened like she'd just realized she'd lost control of a story she'd been telling for years. "What are you doing?" she asked, like I needed permission to breathe. I said I'm moving out. My sister appeared in the doorway, phone already in her hand, eyes bright the way they get when they smell a chance to embarrass someone. My dad stood behind them, quiet, watching like a judge. They didn't ask where I was going first. They asked how. My sister laughed and said with what money. My mom stared at me like she was waiting for the truth that would make her feel powerful again. My dad finally spoke and asked if someone was helping me, the tone heavy with suspicion. So I told them, calmly, the way you tell someone the weather. I have work, real work. I've had it for years. The silence that followed was almost funny. My mom blinked, then scoffed. My sister tilted her head and said, "Sure you do." My dad asked for proof, as if I was applying for approval. I didn't argue. I didn't show them bank statements. I didn't explain contracts. I just said, I'm done living here, and I'm done being treated like a burden. My mom immediately started talking about bills and groceries and how hard things would be now, like my existence had been their full-time charity project. My sister muttered something about me being dramatic. My dad just watched me close the truck door. I drove away with my hands steady on the wheel, and for the first time in years, I felt like the air belonged to me. That's when my phone buzzed with the first notification, the one that turned my quiet exit into a public spectacle. And I let them have their week of victory, because I needed them confident before the floor dropped out from under them. On the 7th day, I didn't wake up angry. I woke up clear. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and pulled up the folder I'd been building for years, the one I never told anyone about. The deed, the probate paperwork, the attorney's letter, the email from the lawyer's office confirming exactly what my grandmother intended. I printed everything. Not because I wanted to be dramatic, but because paper has a way of ending arguments that feelings can't. Then I drove to the post office and sent a certified letter to my parents' address with signature required, and I forwarded the same notice by email so nobody could claim they never saw it. It wasn't a threat. It was a formal statement of reality. I wrote that I was the legal owner of the property, that their right to stay there had always been conditional on respectful occupancy, and that from this point forward we would be handling everything the way adults handle it, in writing, with clear terms and deadlines. I gave them two options. Sign a month-to-month lease at fair market rent with utilities transferred into their names by a specific date, or make plans to vacate according to the legal notice period. No yelling, no insults, just choices. I hit send, set my phone face down, and went back to sipping coffee in a quiet apartment that belonged to me. The first call came less than 10 minutes later. Then another. Then my phone started lighting up like it was possessed. 24 missed calls, 33 messages. My mom's texts were a whiplash of emotions. How could you do this to us? Are you trying to kill your father? You're being manipulated by someone? Family doesn't do this. My dad left 3 voicemails in a row, each one colder than the last, like he was trying to scare me back into my place. He demanded I come over immediately. He said he was going to get a lawyer. He said I didn't understand what I was doing. My sister didn't sound scared at first. She sounded offended. She messaged me like I'd embarrassed her, not like she'd tried to humiliate me in front of 1,000 people. Okay, you made your point. Can you stop now? You're being so extra. When I didn't respond, her tone shifted. She sent voice notes with that fake laugh that always shows up when she's losing control. It was just a joke, Danny. Everyone jokes. Why are you like this? Then my aunt jumped in, because of course she did. I got a long message about gratitude and respect, and how my grandmother would be ashamed of me, which was almost funny considering my grandmother is the reason I had any power at all. I listened to every voicemail once. I read every message once. Then I finally replied with one sentence. I attached a screenshot. It was the Facebook post. Their words, their names, their likes, their laughter. I wrote, "You called me a freeloader in public. Now you can be independent in private." My mom called immediately, sobbing so hard I could hear her struggle to breathe. But even through the tears, she tried to steer it back to control. She said, "You know I didn't mean it like that." She said, "You know your sister is dramatic." She said, "People will talk." She said, "How am I supposed to pay for everything?" And that's when I realized something that made my decision even easier. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because the safety net they'd been bouncing on had finally learned how to stand up. I told her calmly, "I gave you options. Pick one." Then I ended the call. And for the first time, their silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. Woe, days after the notice went out, I sent the lease. Not a handwritten note, not some petty ultimatum, a real month-to-month agreement drafted from a standard Ohio template with a few clean additions, the kind landlords use when they want everything clear and enforceable. The rent was $2,550 a month, which wasn't me being cruel. It was me being honest about what a 3-bedroom place in a decent Columbus suburb costs now. I included a simple line item requirement that mattered more than the number. All utilities had to be transferred into their names by the deadline. Electric with AEP Ohio, gas with Columbia Gas of Ohio, internet with Spectrum. I'd been the one listed on those accounts for years because it was easier, because I was always the one quietly fixing things, because my mom would say she'd handle it and then forget until the lights almost got shut off. I wasn't doing that anymore. I didn't hide the date. I didn't spring it on them. I wrote it in bold and sent it by email and certified mail again. You have 10 days to sign or to provide written notice of your move-out plan. the response I got wasn't negotiation. It was insult disguised as family talk. My dad texted me like he was still the authority. That's ridiculous. We're not paying our own daughter rent. My mom sent paragraphs about how I was greedy and ungrateful, about how I was punishing them for a joke. My sister tried a different angle, the one she always uses when she wants to flip the script. She told me I was making her look bad, that people were messaging her asking questions, that I needed to stop being dramatic. Then she offered $400 like she was doing me a favor. $400, like I was the tenant begging to stay. That's when I realized they weren't just refusing to respect me. They honestly believed I would fold, because I always had. So I made sure the next step didn't rely on them believing me. I posted exactly once. No rant, no name calling, no threats. Just a short statement that I'd moved out and wanted to clarify something because a public post had painted a false picture. I included a photo of the deed with my personal information blocked out and the county stamp visible, and a screenshot of the Facebook post where I'd been called a freeloader. I wrote, "I've been quiet for years, but I'm done letting people rewrite reality. If you laughed at that post, you laughed at the truth you didn't know. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't beg for sympathy." I let the receipts speak. The shift was immediate. People who'd clicked like without thinking started commenting things like, "Wait, you own the house and your family posted that about you." A couple of neighbors I barely knew messaged me privately apologizing for the reaction they'd left. And my sister, who had been so proud of her little victory lap, went strangely quiet, because nothing hurts someone like her more than losing an audience. Behind the scenes, my family escalated. My mom threatened to tell everyone I was mentally unstable. My dad said he'd contest the will, even though the probate was done years ago and the paperwork was airtight. My aunt called and tried to shame me in that syrupy voice people use when they want you to feel small. "Honey, just take the post down and let this go. Your mother is stressed." I asked one question. "Are you offering to pay their rent or take them in?" There was a pause, and then she said, "That's not what I meant." Exactly. The deadline came and went. No signed lease, no utility transfers, no move-out plan. Just more messages that sounded like they were written to win, not to resolve anything. So I did what I said I would do. I called AEP Ohio and scheduled the electric service in my name to be disconnected on the date I'd already provided in writing. I called Columbia Gas and did the same. I called Spectrum and canceled the internet account attached to that address. It wasn't revenge in the dramatic movie sense. It was the consequence of refusing to be responsible. If they wanted to live like adults, they could open their own accounts like adults. The morning the shutoffs took effect, my phone exploded again. My mom called screaming that the house was freezing, that the stove wouldn't light, that my dad couldn't work without internet, that I was ruining their lives. My sister left a voice note that was half crying, half furious, saying, "This is insane, Danny. You're actually insane." My dad didn't yell. He sounded panicked in a way I'd never heard before, like a man realizing his authority only worked when someone believed in it. He said, "Please, just turn it back on. We'll talk. We'll figure it out." That word talk hit me like a joke, because talking was all they'd done for years while I swallowed it. I didn't gloat. I didn't lecture. I sent one message. The same message every time. "The accounts are in my name. I gave you the deadline to transfer them. You chose not to." Then they did what I knew they'd do the moment inconvenience got real. They ran to my aunt's place, dragging their suitcases and their pride into her spare room, and suddenly the people who'd called me a freeloader were living off someone else's couch. My sister started posting vague quotes about betrayal and toxic people, but the comments weren't going the way she wanted anymore. A couple of her friends asked what really happened, and when she snapped at them, they backed away. My mom tried to pull the victim card at work, borrowing money from a coworker to cover a bill that wasn't even in her name, and when the truth caught up with her, and the borrowing pattern surfaced, she was called into a meeting and her hours got cut hard. My dad started talking about picking up gig work, anything quick, because the credit cards were already stretched, and now they had no house control to hide behind. They kept telling each other this was temporary, that I would come to my senses, that family always caves. And maybe the old me would have. But the old me was the girl who paid rent to live in her own house and smiled through insults to keep the peace. The new me had paperwork, deadlines, and a calm that scared them more than anger ever could. By the time they realized I wasn't bluffing, they'd already burned the only bridges that could have saved them. My dad kept talking about lawyers, about contesting the will, about how a judge would never let a daughter do this to her own parents. He said it like the court system ran on shame and tradition. But the real world doesn't care about who feels entitled. It cares about paperwork, deadlines, and whether you followed the process. I did. Every step was clean. Every notice was documented. Every conversation that mattered was in writing. When I filed, I didn't do it with anger. I did it the way you file taxes or sign a contract. Because at that point, this wasn't a family argument anymore. It was a boundary enforcement. They had made it impossible for me to believe in anything softer. The day the court date came, they showed up dressed like they were going to a church fundraiser, like appearances could erase years of disrespect. My mom had that tight, practiced expression she uses when she wants sympathy from strangers. My sister walked in like she still had an audience somewhere, chin lifted, phone in her hand, eyes scanning the room like she wanted to find someone watching. My dad tried to stand a little too close to me, the way he used to when I was younger. Like his presence alone was enough to control the outcome. When we were called up, the judge didn't ask how we felt. The judge asked for documents. That was the moment my family's confidence started to crack. My dad's voice got louder, then softer, then finally shaky. My mom tried to cry. My sister tried to talk over me. I didn't raise my voice once. I handed over the certified mail receipts, the notice, the lease offer they refused to sign, the utility transfer deadline, and the screenshots of the public posts that proved why we weren't doing this informally anymore. The judge didn't react emotionally, but I could see the shift in attention when the timeline became clear. They had been given options. They had ignored them. The order came through. It wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. But to them, it felt like the ground moving under their feet. Outside the courtroom, my mother grabbed my arm like she had a right to touch me. Her nails dug in through my sleeve, and her voice went low and urgent, like she was trying to make this a private guilt conversation again. She said, "You're really going to do this. You're going to ruin us." My sister hissed that I was evil. My dad stepped in and told me to be reasonable, like I was the one who had posted that I was a freeloader to 1,000 people. I looked at my mother's hand on my arm and gently removed it, not with anger, just with finality. I said I offered you a lease. I offered you time. You chose pride. Then I walked away. The weirdest part was how quiet I felt. I had expected to feel triumphant or devastated. Instead, I felt steady, like a person who finally stopped carrying a weight they didn't realize had been crushing them. The day they had to leave, it wasn't some dramatic scene where I stood in the driveway and watched with a smile. I wasn't interested in that kind of victory. I stayed inside my own life. But I did come by briefly, with my attorney's instructions in mind, because I needed to make sure the property was handled correctly and nothing turned into a vandalism situation. My dad avoided eye contact. My mom moved around the house like she wanted to punish the walls on the way out, slamming drawers, muttering under her breath, acting like every object belonged to her simply because she had touched it. My sister kept glancing at her phone, posting vague quotes about betrayal and toxic people, still trying to shape the narrative even while her suitcases were stacked by the door. At one point, she said, loud enough for me to hear, that people were going to find out what kind of person I really am. I almost laughed, because the only reason anyone found out anything was because she'd put my humiliation on display first. She created the stage. I just refused to keep playing the role she assigned me. When they finally pulled away, the house looked the same from the street. But it felt different, like the air inside had changed. I walked through the empty rooms and noticed how much of my childhood had been shaped by walking on eggshells. I noticed the places where my mom had hung decorations to look like a perfect family, while the inside was rotten. I noticed the kitchen where she complained about cooking for me while ordering delivery for herself. I noticed the living room where my sister sat laughing at comments like I wasn't a person, just a joke. I didn't cry. I took photos for documentation, locked the doors, and left. That house had been a cage for too long, even when I technically owned it. I wasn't going to stay attached to it just because it was familiar. My family's downfall wasn't instant like a movie, but it was satisfying in a quieter way, because it was real. When you spend years living off someone else's silence, you forget how expensive life is when the bill finally comes due. They moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, the kind my sister used to mock when she saw people posting it online. No backyard, no bonus room, no space for my mom to host her little barbecues and pretend she was the queen of the neighborhood. My dad started driving for Uber and doing delivery apps because the pride he wore like armor didn't pay rent. My mom took a part-time job at a big box store and told anyone who would listen that her daughter abandoned her, carefully leaving out the part where she called me a failure in public and expected me to keep funding her lifestyle. My sister tried to keep her social media image intact, but it didn't hit the same when the background changed from a nice suburban house to a cramped living room with secondhand furniture. People noticed. Some people asked questions. And for once, she couldn't control what they believed. The most satisfying part wasn't watching them struggle. It was watching the world stop rewarding their cruelty. The same friends who had laughed at that post started distancing themselves. Not because they suddenly became saints, but because no one wants to be associated with someone who humiliates their own sister for likes and then gets exposed by receipts. My sister would post a dramatic quote about loyalty, and the comments would be quiet. My mom would make a vague post about ungrateful children, and a neighbor would reply with a polite question about what really happened. My aunt tried to keep the family pressure machine running, but it backfired. She'd call and lecture me about forgiveness, and I'd ask one calm question. Are you paying their rent? Are you letting them move in long term? Are you covering their utilities? The answer was always some version of silence or a weak excuse about boundaries. That's when I understood the pattern clearly. The people who demand you sacrifice the most are always the ones who volunteer the least. My ex, Tyler, even tried to come back. The timing was almost insulting. He messaged me like nothing had happened. Like the moment he saw I had stability, he suddenly remembered my name. He said he'd been thinking about me and hoped I was doing okay. Then he slid in a comment about how impressive it was that I handled everything so well. Translation: now that you look successful, I'm interested again. I blocked him without responding, and that small click felt like closing a door I should have shut years ago. After the eviction, I made the last decision that cut the cord completely. I sold the house. People think that's the harshest part, like I should have kept it as a symbol or used it as leverage. But keeping it would have kept me connected to them, to the memories, to the constant possibility of them trying to crawl back in. I didn't want leverage. I wanted freedom. I listed it properly through an agent so everything was legal and clean, and when it showed up online, it felt like watching a chapter of my life finally become a file I could close. When the sale went through, I didn't celebrate with a big party. I sat at my kitchen table in my apartment, stared at the confirmation, and felt something in my chest loosen, like my nervous system finally believed it was safe. I used the money the way my family never did. I invested back into my business, upgraded equipment, paid for professional training, hired an accountant so my taxes were airtight, and built a real emergency fund because I never wanted to live in fear of one bad month again. I also did something that surprised me. I paid for therapy, not because I was broken, but because I didn't want to carry their voices into my future. I didn't want to keep hearing Freeloader in my head every time I rested. I didn't want to keep second-guessing myself every time I said no. Healing, I learned, isn't soft. It's disciplined. It's choosing yourself over the version of you that was trained to shrink. People ask if I feel guilty. I don't. I feel sad sometimes, because I didn't want a war. I wanted a family. But love without respect is just control in a nicer outfit. And family isn't a free pass to humiliate you, use you, and then demand your silence when you finally push back. Boundaries aren't cruelty, they're self-respect. Consequences aren't revenge, they're education. My sister thought a Facebook post would be a victory lap. She wanted applause. She wanted everyone to agree that I was the problem. What she didn't understand is that when you bully someone in public, you're also putting yourself on trial in public. The moment I stopped protecting their image, the moment I showed the truth without screaming, their whole story collapsed. And I didn't have to ruin them. They did it to themselves. All I did was stop saving them from the results. If there's one lesson I hope sticks with anyone listening, it's this. Don't confuse kindness with permission. Don't confuse silence with weakness. And never build your confidence on humiliating someone who's quietly learning how to stand. Because one day they will. And when they do, your likes and comments won't protect you from the real world. Our team at the channel Revenge Mangan is dedicated to creating meaningful and engaging fictional scripts designed to entertain while delivering thoughtful lessons. All stories on this channel are purely fictional and created with the purpose of sharing educational values and positive messages with viewers. This story highlights the importance of self-respect, personal boundaries, and accountability within family relationships. It shows that silence does not mean weakness, and that standing up for oneself can be done calmly, legally, and with integrity. Through its emotional journey, the script encourages viewers to reflect on how words, actions, and public humiliation can carry lasting consequences.